this is Jackie here with the Sexy Politico. I'm here with Dr. Emily Kirkwold. She's here to talk about natural family planning and about non-hormonal ways of dealing with birth control and just getting to be more in tune with our bodies, because I'm going to just speak from personal experience. I was on birth control from the time I was 16 until I was about 25. And I realized it that birth control made me feel sad, but like the world made me feel as though that there was no other way to deal with pregnancy. And while I needed to grow up a whole bunch at between 25 and now 38, I think we all do. I think that women need to learn more about their bodies. I think that women need to learn more about their hormones, because I personally know people who have never had a real cycle, who have never had a cycle without birth control.
Mhm.
So so could you could you tell us a little bit more about you and anything you would like to share before we get started with this interview?
Yeah, thank you so much. I am happy to be here and happy to just share information. Exactly like you said, there's just not enough people talking to women about their bodies. And my experience too was that I didn't learn about my own body growing up. I didn't even learn about it in pharmacy school. So just a little bit about me. I'm a pharmacist by background. I graduated with my doctorate of pharmacy in 2013. So I've always been interested in learning more about how our bodies work. But I didn't learn about natural family planning in pharmacy school. It wasn't until my husband and I had a difficult time getting pregnant with our second child that I decided that I wanted to look into other options. And so I did a lot of researching and I learned about natural family planning, and it literally changed my life. And so my mission, my with what I do as a natural family planning educator is really that, to educate, to inform, and help women make more informed decisions.
I feel as though we need to just address the cat in the room, or I don't know if that's the right expression or not, but most people think of natural family planning as a very Catholic thing. I mean, I am Catholic. I am Catholic. I did learn about natural family planning during our engagement retreat. I don't even remember what it was called. The class we had to take before we got married in the church.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is that even before that, because I didn't get married till I was 32, I started researching my own body and like what here's my cycle and things of that nature. And I realized that I had already been researching a lot of the different aspects of natural family planning without looking into the morality of the entire thing. And I think that when we talk about it in this sense, we need to realize that natural family planning is not just a religious thing. It is about learning about your body.
Yes, yes. And right. It's kind of crazy to me that it does seem like natural family planning and that term for what we're talking about is some sort of Catholic secret. And but it's like, why is this a Catholic thing when we're really just talking about how a woman's cycle works and how she can pay attention to her body? So I do like that I've seen more of a movement about fertility awareness,
Mm-hmm.
um, using that term, or even people will use the term like just cycle charting, just paying attention to your cycle, keeping track of what's going on with your cycle. One of the other big myths I feel like with natural family planning, that term, the other thing I hear is that people think family planning means trying to get pregnant. And yes, natural family planning can effectively help you get pregnant, but it also can help you effectively avoid pregnancy. It also can just help you know your body better.
Exactly. I I feel like I didn't really get to know my body and myself until I was 25 and got off of birth control. Not and that was mostly because I realized how sad I was. I I don't know if I was clinically depressed, but I felt sad when I was on birth control, and I didn't realize I didn't have to be sad. I was like, is this just my personality?
Mhm.
And I know so many people who have they go on hormonal birth control when they're like 14, when their pediatricians are like, "Oh, this will help you for acne." They stay on it when they
Mhm.
become sexually active, and then they're like 32, 33 years old and they've never had like that cycle. Like they don't know what their cycles actually are. And it's
Right.
crazy that we're sold so much pharmaceuticals, and when if we really think about it, women didn't always have 10 kids. Women knew about their bodies, and I mean, nothing's perfect. Hell, not even the birth control pill is perfect.
Right.
But not women women in the 17 and 1800s had 2 to 3 kids. They they planned their cycles. They planned their kids. Women in the
Mhm.
Victorian era had more kids because they had more money and they wanted to. But it's like this mythical information of womanhood has been lost.
Definitely, definitely. And as a pharmacist, I think about how other medication works. Most other medications we prescribe to people, it's because they have some kind of illness, they have some kind of deficiency, and we're trying to get their body back to its natural state. Something's not working quite right, and we're trying to give them a medication to help their body work back the way it was supposed to work. With birth control, though, if you think about it, not only are we prescribing it for acne or irregular cycles, we also prescribe it to women who their bodies are working perfectly like they're supposed to, and we prescribe it to them so that it stops their body from working. It shuts down a normal functioning body system. And there's no other medication that works like that.
Yeah. And I I feel like we've just been sometimes I feel like women have been sold this bag of goods that they're like they're told in the 60s that we need birth control to control our reproductive lives, which I mean, yes, birth control was one of the major things that helped women enter the workforce in full force, being able to control their fertility. But also,
Right.
what if the Victorian era hadn't hidden all this information about fertility? What if the Victorian era had taught, what if women still passed down this information of cycles and how your
Mhm.
body works? What if it feels as though we got the pill and then all the doctors stopped learning about women's bodies until all of the all of the other stuff that the birth control pill has caused started coming to fruition.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and if there wouldn't have been such a stigma that's built up that as women we can't even talk about our cycles, or that our periods are gross and dirty and we need to, hide that from anyone, that we're on our period or that we have a period at all.
Yeah. Um every single person who has a period will know what it's like to hide a tampon, a pad, or something in their shirt sleeve.
Yes.
Everybody's done it. Everybody's done it. That is a universal experience. Because for some
Mhm.
reason it's a secret.
Right, right.
It's
It would be horrible if someone saw me holding a tampon.
it's like what's worse, having them think you're taking a giant deuce or changing your pad. It's like
Right, right.
both bodily functions.
Mm-hmm.
But so let's talk about natural family planning in the broad spectrum, because I know that it can get very nitty-gritty. So let's
Right.
start with the big picture, and then let's narrow it down a little bit. So what
Yeah.
is natural family planning?
Yes. So natural family planning means knowing your body's natural signs of ovulation, keeping track of those signs, and then using that information. And so using that information can then be, your time of ovulation. So that means the time that as a woman you're able to become pregnant. That's a myth out there, that a woman can get pregnant any day of her cycle. That's not true. The science shows us that technically there are only 6 days each cycle that a woman can become pregnant. And so you pay attention to signs that your body's giving you that let you know when you're in that time, you keep track of them, and then you can use that information to avoid pregnancy, achieve pregnancy, or for monitoring your health.
So if somebody was wanting to avoid pregnancy in a natural way, how could somebody who is not sexually active, not avoid pregnancy, how could someone who is not sexually active start learning more about their cycle? Say a super smart 16-year-old who is not sexually active.
Yeah, yeah. So there are three main signs of ovulation that you can pay attention to. And so the three signs are cervical mucus, urine hormone levels, and basal body temperature. So cervical mucus or cervical fluid is a normal body fluid that's produced throughout your cycle, and at the time of ovulation, that cervical fluid changes. And so, by paying attention to this fluid, how you would even notice if you had this fluid was you go to the bathroom like normal. And when you wipe, you pay attention to, is there any fluid there? And what does it look like? And what does it feel like? And what you'll notice is that at the time of ovulation, this cervical fluid becomes more present, and it becomes very different than it looks in the other parts of your cycle. And so that's one sign. That's probably the go-to sign that if people are going down the route of natural family planning, fertility awareness, you start paying attention to. For one, it's a free body fluid. Your body's already making it. You're already going to the bathroom. So it's just another thing to pay attention to. It's also the sign that's been studied the longest. But women could also choose to track urine hormone levels. So we have technology now where you can buy just a simple at-home urine test. There's a few different tests to test different hormones that will rise during your cycle, and I can explain those more if you'd
Mm-hmm.
like. And then the other sign is basal body temperature, or your body temperature at rest. And by keeping track of your temperature every day throughout your cycle, what a woman will notice is that there is a subtle rise in body temperature right after ovulation. And so that's a sign to confirm that, yes, I did just ovulate because I saw that rise in the body temperature.
Yeah, I've personally, I tried using the basal thermometers, and I found having a 1-year-old who does not have a regular sleep schedule, because you basically have to take your temperature at rest at the exact same time every day. And if you are already a parent, you know that your children are not alarm clocks. Well, they're alarm
For
clocks,
sure.
but they're not alarm clocks at the exact same time.
Yes, they're not consistent alarm clocks.
No, no. And so those the hormone test strips, you can get those pretty cheaply on Amazon. for anybody who's interested. We can leave some links in the show notes. I
Mm-hmm.
think I got a pack of like 50 for $15, something real cheap like that. And
Mm-hmm.
also, there are apps for everything. There's an app for everything. You could you these women who've been doing this since the 70s have like these paper charts that look like they're tracking like where gold is and like scientific notations and all that. There's an app for everything now.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. I I will say just a couple things about apps though. When you're looking at apps, apps are great, right? Because yeah, we have our phones with us all the time. So if you want to pay attention to your signs, why not just throw it in an app? Um, just know that when you're looking into different apps, a lot of the apps out there are designed to help women get pregnant. So if that is not your goal, just know that it might not give you all of the information that you want. The other thing with apps is that some cycle tracking apps will predict when your day of ovulation is coming, and some don't. So some are more just you're paying attention to your signs, you're inputting the information, and it's keeping track for you of what you saw the past few days, but you're determining, does this sign mean I'm ovulating or not? And then some apps, based on what you put in, are saying, oh, we think you're ovulating or not. With some of those predictive apps, what they're doing is they're comparing your cycle to the population average. And the thing with our natural cycles is that there really is not a great average. It's really normal for our cycle length to vary from cycle to cycle, and it's also very normal for the day of ovulation to vary from cycle to cycle. So just be careful with how you're using the apps. I can give a couple of names, or if you want in the show notes, a couple of tracking apps that I've heard good things about. What I do personally is I actually keep track of my cycle just in the Google Sheets app in a spreadsheet. And I just know, here's my cycle date, here's the day my period came, and then here's the signs that I'm seeing on that date. And that works for me. So,
Yeah. I mean, basically, I think most women just need to get more friendly with their own bodies.
mm-hmm.
Be willing to touch stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but also if you're putting a tampon in, you're touching just about the same amount as you would if you're putting a tampon in.
Right.
Yeah. So there are many different natural family planning methods that if you Google natural family planning, so like there's the Marquette method, there's God, I'm blanking out on the other ones.
Creighton, there's Billings, there's FEMM,
Yeah.
there's yes, a number of
Yeah,
different
there's ones
methods.
that have like
Symptopound.
machines. There's ones that and it's like what what are the difference between these different methods and what should somebody who isn't, let's say someone who isn't Catholic and isn't doing this for religious purposes, should they look into these different methods, or is there a method that's better for somebody who isn't Catholic?
Yeah, great questions. So the differences in the different methods really come down to what sign of ovulation is being tracked. And so I talked about, those three main signs of ovulation are cervical mucus, urine hormone levels, and the basal body temperature. And so before you go researching all the different methods, you want to think about what is a sign of ovulation that I can see myself paying attention to. Can I go to the bathroom and wipe and look at my cervical fluid? Or is that just going to totally gross me out right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, do I want to buy a machine or at least some other urine test strips to be able to track my hormones. That is going to be an extra expense, but maybe I like seeing those hormone level numbers. Do I have a 1-year-old at home? Do I have a consistent schedule where I am going to want to check my body temperature at the same time every morning? And then from there, you can think about what method is going to work best for me. So I'll just to name a few to kind of give you a starting point. So there's 2 main methods that are cervical mucus only methods, where you're only paying attention to the cervical fluid, and that would be the Billings method and the Creighton method. Then the Marquette method, like you mentioned, is one where you can track only urine hormone levels alone. So you're tracking 2 different hormones. You're tracking estrogen and LH. And so if you want to do the urine hormone levels only, you can use the Marquette method. And then the FEMM method is one that is a double check method. You're tracking your cervical fluid, but then you're using the urine hormone level test strips to double check ovulation. And then the symptothermal method, which is taught by SymptoPro, it's taught by SymptoPro, the Couple League, or Justice method practitioners. All of them teach the symptothermal method, which is a double check method where you're tracking cervical fluid and then you're using body temperature to double check ovulation. The benefit of using a specific method is you get access to an instructor who is certified in that method, who has gone through extra training and can provide some support to you as you're tracking your cycle. Because in general, I can tell you, oh, pay attention to what you see when you wipe, and it's going to be different at the sign of ovulation. From personal experience, sometimes when you're tracking your cervical fluid, it's not always as black as and white. There are times where you might be like, is this
Doesn't
really
help.
showing ovulation
It also
or
doesn't help that
not?
toilet paper's white.
Right. Yes. So that's where, oh, you can reach out to your instructor and they can provide a little bit more detail of, oh, this is what we see, or this is what we see, or you can keep track of a chart, and then they can look at your chart and see, based on what they've learned, is this matching up with, how they've been instructed. So, especially if you want to use a method for avoiding pregnancy, I would highly recommend using a specific method. As far as, being Catholic or not, a number of these methods are based on Catholic principles. Most methods, I would say, even if they're based on Catholic principles, aren't like preaching Catholic theology or, requiring people to be Catholic. But I do find from, what people tell me is that can vary regionally, and it can vary from instructor to instructor. But there are methods that aren't associated with Catholicism at all. And so that would be the FEMM method, which is the cervical fluid with the urine hormone levels. And the Justice method is one of those symptothermal that teaches the cervical mucus and body temperature. Those 2 specifically are not linked to Catholicism at all, if that's important to you.
There are people who are atheists and are like, I don't want to do anything that's dealing with religion.
Yeah.
But I think honestly, I almost wish some of these things were taught in school.
Right.
I mean, at the very least, the fact that you have a cycle, this is what your cycle looks like. This is, you should be tracking how many days are between the first day of your period and the last day of your period. Because if it wasn't for apps, I would, every time a doctor asked me, I'd be like, or maybe that's just because I have 2 kids.
I was like that as a teenager. I definitely remember going to the doctor and they asked me when my last period was, and I'm like, I don't know.
Last month.
Yeah.
It was
or
last
two,
month.
something.
I tried
Yeah.
to avoid swim class.
Well, the other thing that I think should be taught to girls, yeah, as you're developing a cycle, it's not just about you're going to have this bleed and you should do something about this bleed. It's knowing, hey, you're going to have a period, you're going to have a time of ovulation, and then your cycle's going to end and it's going to start all over again. Because the thing with our cycles is that our hormone levels go up and down throughout the cycle. And so if you're keeping track of your full cycle, if you're keeping track of what day does my period come, when do I ovulate, and then when is the end of my cycle, that can give you so much information about your hormone health. Because what the science shows us is that from the first day of your period until the time of ovulation, that part of the cycle is more tied to a rise in estrogen. And then the time from ovulation until the end of your period is more tied to the hormone progesterone. And so, especially if you're keeping track of these signs over time, if all of a sudden you notice, hey, that first part of my cycle is getting really long or really short, that can be a sign that, hey, maybe something's going on with my estrogen. Maybe I need to go speak to my doctor or some other holistic practitioner about this before you might be having any kind of symptoms.
You know, I'm 38. Premenopause is probably going to hit me in the next 5 years. This is something that tracking your cycle, you'll know beforehand, and you can start preparing yourself mentally.
Yes. 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 And that's the other piece that I think is so important and I wish is emphasized more to girls too, that having a cycle is just part of how our bodies were made, and that it, because of our hormones and because we have these cycles, it is completely normal to feel differently on different days of our cycle. It's completely normal to have different levels of energy on different days of our cycle. And that is a biological thing.
Yeah,
And
and the
I
acne that half the time periods are prescribed for, it's hormonal. I mean, I didn't have
Mhm.
the acne as a teenager. Maybe it was because of birth control, but after having my second child, it's like, hi, acne. I didn't have you as a teenager. Now you're here, and it's just your hormones change.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah,
And
and just knowing that that's okay.
I think we just need to stop as we need to stop treating women's bodies as though they're broken when they are functioning normally.
Yes.
I think that's the most important thing we need to say, is that you're not broken because you have a cycle. You're not broken because you're fertile. You're not broken because even you're not even broken if your cycle is unusual. That there's different normals for different people.
Yes. Yes, yes, and that's a big benefit of tracking too, is being able to see what is normal for you, and that might not be what's normal for your best friend or your sister or your mom, and that's okay. And then being able to know, okay, if something's going on in your cycle that doesn't feel normal to you, well then you can do something about it, you can talk to someone about it. You know, it pains me so much when someone comes to me to learn natural family planning because they want to get pregnant and they want to get pregnant yesterday, and this is the first time that they're tracking their cycle, and we find out, oh, you're actually not really showing signs of ovulation. Oh, this part of your cycle really is really short. It seems like your body might not be producing enough progesterone. And if that person would have just been tracking their cycle, you know, a year prior, a few months prior, even, they could have seen that ahead of time and been able to get some help ahead of time before now feeling so much pressure, like I wanted to get pregnant now, and now I have this additional barrier.
Yeah, I mean, at 32 when I got married, I had been off birth control for 7 years. So I was lucky in that sense because it was like we had no pharmaceutical issue that was stopping us from getting pregnant. It was complete but we were also very blessed that we were completely fertile, had no, I mean, basically
Right.
first time there's my eldest. But I don't know, I'm not a doctor in any shape of the word, but I wonder if some of these people who've been on birth control for 10, 15 years, they're like, they get off birth control and they're like, their cycles just don't go back to normal for 10 years. And then they're like 45, go
Right.
bleep, 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 bleep.
Right.
uh, so what advice would you give to somebody who is wanting to learn more about their cycles to not get pregnant? And then what advice before we end would you give to somebody who is wanting to get pregnant?
Yes. So if you're wanting to track your cycle to avoid pregnancy, I would emphasize what I said earlier, that you want to find a method and find an instructor that you can work with. If you're wanting to avoid pregnancy, you want to be confident in the signs that you're seeing and confident that you're identifying what days you can get pregnant or not. And so I would really encourage you to look into, what are your options, and think about what is a sign of ovulation that I can see myself consistently track. And I can give you a website that I think is really great towards gearing people towards different methods. That's a non-religious website.
And we should also add, yes, yes, many of you are thinking condoms, condoms, condoms. And yes, condoms are great, but but nobody's perfect. I can't. There are plenty of people in this world who are like, I use condoms, and then they get in the mood, and then one thing leads to another, and
Mhm.
either they didn't put it on right or they didn't put it on at all. And it's always great to have more than one way to prevent pregnancy.
Yes. Yes. And on that note too, you can always decide to combine condoms with a fertility awareness method if that's what you choose to do too. And you can, especially if you're, really strictly desiring to avoid pregnancy, that can give you some extra confidence. And
Especially
then
when you're learning how to do it.
yes, yes. And then for women who are listening who want to get pregnant, my biggest piece of advice for you is just to start paying attention to your body. Start paying attention to that cervical fluid, that free body fluid. Just start noticing when you wipe, take a look, see if you see any fluid there, see if you see a change in the fluid. And if you start seeing more and you see a lot of this stretchy, slippery, egg white consistency type fluid, uh go and let your significant other know that tonight's a good night.
Mm, that's my second child. Thank you so much for being on the Sexy Politico. This has been a great conversation, and I hope that plenty of people are able to get something out of this, because I wish I had known more about this when I was in my 20s, because it would have prevented, honestly, fertility awareness for me would have prevented a lot of depression, because being able because for me, hormone birth control was not great. And I know it's not that way for everybody, but I know that I'm not alone.
For sure.
So, is there anything you want to end with before we sign off?
No, just thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I love this conversation, and thank you for sharing this information with other women.
Thank you very much, and have a great day. Bye.